At Peak Perspective, we train, coach and develop leaders. In our programs, we often meet individuals who early on were trusted with leadership responsibilities. As they move on in life, the pressure increases. Now they're not only dealing with the expectations of work, but also life at large. Children, marriage, family, their own well-being. Today I'm meeting up with Leif Strauß, who has experience of both, early leadership and the pressure of life. I am very excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm very excited as well.
Leif, you're a father of three, engineer from background. You've gone through the process of closing a plant, and at one point in time, you're responsible for a whole factory with 750 employees. Your leadership career started early. Already at the age of 29, you had 25 direct reports. You'd like to share a bit your experiences with that early leadership?
Yes, very much. I think, starting into leadership in the age of 29 after only 2 years with the company, only I think like 8-9 months after finishing a traineeship or trainee program was unexpected, first of all. But I think in retrospective it was a good point in time to start with leadership because I was kind of a raw diamond. During the traineeship I went through several different departments in different entities of a company. I did an assignment abroad in India where I was very close to the general manager there. And during this time I saw many different leadership styles and I had a chance to build a picture of the perfect leadership from my perspective. And when I was asked to take this early leadership role, I did not hesitate a second not to take it because I was really excited in applying this and in doing better compared to things that I had experienced so far.
Mm-hmm. Were there moments of fear?
Of course there was a moment of fear. There was a moment of fear even when I took the decision because leading 25 direct reports, being responsible for a key department in a factory, I perceived it as a personal risk also for my career. I was afraid to fail. And I was, of course, afraid what this would make with my career to take such a step that early.
What did you have to develop to go into that role?
I think, it was a substantial shift in many perspectives. From education, from my studies, from the first days, or from the trainee program, you were used to exchange with your peers. You were part of a team, of different teams, but you could always more or less openly share your views, you could exchange. You were of course observed by your managers, but most of the times you could be yourself and you could simply observe and judge, provide feedback. With a step into leadership, I switched the role from the sideline commenter to the trainer, and you were in some perspective, you were on air the whole day. And what this made with me was that I realized that, of course, you cannot build the same relationships with your team members as with colleagues. And of course, that statements that you made were perceived and were interpreted by your team members. And I would say I was not fully aware about this, but I learned this very quickly, especially considering the fact that the team I led there were many people the same age of me, some were older, but it was simply, I had to realize that I could not make friends within my team, and that I had to, and this is actually also the price that you have to pay somehow, that at least in this early leadership, I felt that I had to keep a healthy distance to my team as well, at least in my free time.
Healthy distance and a bit of loneliness?
Yes, also a bit of loneliness, especially considering the fact that the assignment that I took was in a very remote area. So I was a weekend commuter of 2.5 hours ride. And when I was working there, I was mostly alone because I was living there during the weekdays. In the end, I was mostly working, so you could also say I was sleeping there during the weekdays. But you were a lot of the time you were alone. I think that's also the big difference if you do this kind of leadership close to a headquarters, for instance, or if you do it in an affiliate, because there I was really mostly alone. There was one peer in the management team who was similar age than I was. He came from this region, but the rest of my peers were completely different stages of life. I mean, I didn't have children, and they were grandparents already, so there was not much. I wouldn't say there was not much to exchange, but it was a different way of exchange. And in addition to that, especially the older colleagues were a little bit skeptical about this type of guy. Not me personally, but this type of guy coming there, taking an assignment, and where it was clear that you don't stay for 10 years, but rather maybe for 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
How did you deal with that?
I think I approached them, and I think, especially when it comes to the perception of my colleagues, I would say it was open discussions, approaching them, trying to share views, and trying to understand their concerns about this setup, but at the same time trying to seek for benefits of both. And I think over time we found those benefits, because even though I was very young and inexperienced, I brought many things in, being it a better network to the headquarters, being it various experiences from the short previous assignments, and I think over time, and even I would say after a short time, I had the feeling that it was a mutual benefit.
Going back to that loneliness, did you have someone you talked to? Did you have a peer or a mentor, a coach, or a senior?
Yes, I had. Coming to that, I think there were different people who helped me a lot into this role. First of all, it was the person who offered me the role. It was the boss of my then future boss, and he was really. He was a very senior guy. He was a very experienced guy. He was this type of guy you really had respect for, and I think he helped me a lot. Not in way of coaching me after I started, but only to set the scene to get into there. No? Because he approached me and said, "I think you can do this. I think you can do leadership, and I think your set of values, your way of treating people." Is preparing you, or will enable you to become a good leader even without having the experience. When it came to finding candidates for this role, there were other candidates who had leadership experience, but he said, other than other people, I believe you are the better candidate. And he also shared with me that there were other people in the senior management who did not think that I was the right person. But it was the way I think it was the trust that he was giving me, but at the same time, the transparency that he also said, it's not going to be a holiday camp. It's going to be a tough ride, and not only for a couple of months, but for the whole time. You will have to dedicate yourself a lot to this role to get into it, but you will have big chances. But he also, and this was, in my opinion, in retrospective, the most important aspect in motivating me, investing into this role. He also, without asking, by the way, he also shared with me what would happen if I would not succeed, because this can happen. He also even admitted himself that it was a personal risk. He understood that it was a personal risk for me, And he was clear, saying, you will not get big applause, you will not get the biggest appraisal, but just for trying, you will get respect, and he would pave me a way out if I would not succeed, but not with a big next step, but simply to say, okay, it was a trial, and you get another chance. And this actually gave me such a solid, really solid foundation, made me humble, not like proud to say, okay, great, I'm 29, I'm such this great type of guy. Not at all, not even a second. I was really, it made me very, very humble, just to repeat this, to really fully focus on becoming a good leader and making a good job there. This was the one person. The other ones was my mentor I had from the traineeship. So he had several years of leadership experience, and also, for instance, my boss from my assignment abroad, who had also plenty of leadership experience. So I regularly exchanged with them, and this helped a lot. Even if it was only every 3 to 6 months, but it helped a lot to exchange perspective. Another aspect which helped me a lot was that when I came into the role, I got some personal coaching where I had, especially in the first 8 weeks, 2 or 3 months, I had the change to ask simple questions, like in German, to whether I could say "du" to my subordinates, or whether I should rather stay with a "sie," which was a topic for me because I was so young. I was afraid that they might not respect me. I mean, in the end, all those questions were, I would say, are really not the relevant ones to get respect from subordinates.
I think that respect, also when you start early on, lacking a bit of that experience that some other managers might have gained. How did you manage to get respect?
It was one of the biggest fears. How do they accept you? You are coming from somewhere else, you have less experience, and I was also afraid that there were many people in the team who themselves had aspirations on that role and who were disappointed that they didn't get it. But eventually it turned out completely different. So I think, and that I think is a big aspect to consider. Leadership or being a manager of a team is not just an honor, it's a duty, it's a service. And you have to deal with a lot of problems, with a lot of uncomfortable problems. And what I found out, that there were not even many people who wanted that role, who were, I wouldn't say they were feeling sorry for me, that maybe not that much. There were other roles where I really felt like that, but I mean, we might come to that later. But first of all, that wasn't the topic. To get respect was, for me, to treat people respectfully. This was one big, one important topic, and to be transparent with them. Be transparent and trying to explain, not justify, but at least trying to explain the logics why we took certain decisions as we did, and why some things were not that easy as they could be. And I tried. There was one person who made an important comment to me, which I remember again and again, was that when it comes to change, it's often said, this team doesn't want to change. Those guys are that long, they don't want to change. And this person came to me very early and said, you know what, there are many people saying we don't want to change, but the only thing we want is we want to be taken on the bus. And this is still key for me. If you want people to change, but also if you simply want their respect, you need to treat them with respect, and you need to give them the chance to understand why you're acting as you act, even if it's really unpopular decisions, which of course I also had to take.
If you would talk to that young Leif today and give him a piece of advice, what would you tell him?
Take things more easy.
Mm-hmm.
Take things more easy. because I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, wanting to do everything right, wanting maybe not everything at once. I think I would say that I had a sort of healthy assessment how fast I could achieve things, but when it came to me, I didn't leave myself much time. I was really working myself to exhaustion, I would say, especially in the first years. Over time, I think I found a balance, but the first 2 years were really crazy.
Were there fear of failure?
Yeah, interestingly, the first months were really good, because I think the first month worked out okay, and of course then you develop confidence and you think it's great and so on, and then you have, I think, the typical curves. After 6 months, after 9 months, there were the first phases where I was struggling a bit with various things. I mean, of course, first of all, complexity was huge. So complexity topic-wise or like content-wise, because the area I was responsible was really complex, and I had to and I wanted to learn most of the content. At least I wanted to understand the content that I was responsible for. Then I had to learn leadership, and then there were, of course, difficult decisions. And there was also the fact that it makes something with you when you are only concentrating on your work, and when you are really exhausted on the weekends, and you are partly even tired to meet up with friends. And in this period, of course, I also was developing fears. What would happen if I would not succeed? And I think I was very much putting myself under pressure in this area, okay, you have to do a job like minimum 2 years, and if you don't succeed, you have a problem. And I was putting myself a lot of pressure.
So concretely, what would it mean to relax and not to put that much pressure? What would you tell him to do? Because it's a good general advice, but
yeah, and I have to say, I got this advice several
probably
times,
already, yes.
even from my direct boss, who approached me several times and said, take it easy, man, take it easier, and you will still be successful. What it means is to search for activity that distracts you from work, from your thinking about work. Because what I really did was I was working 10-12 hours every day, and in the evening I think you were doing the basic things. Yeah, you were doing some you took your food, you relaxed, you did some sports, but I would say the sports was not too much part, and that was the only time where you were mentally distracted. And I think this is something which I would take far more serious, especially also when it comes to the weekends. Not just to say, okay, I'm there to relax, and if there are some things to catch up, I'm also sitting half of a Saturday. But rather to say, I'm really putting a certain priority to my hobbies. So there were tendencies where I did this. So I wouldn't say it's not black or white. No, it's not that I didn't do this at all. I tried this, but in retrospective, I would say I didn't put enough effort in it, and I would also say that I should have ranked a higher priority to this.
This is also something we see in our programs, and one of our ideas is sometimes you shut off the brain completely. You don't think anymore. You don't take it with you. Mm-hmm. Mm. If you would give a piece of advice to those hungry talents who are eager to take on that early leadership role, to be like you, to become like you, what would you tell them?
I mean, first of all, I would tell that it's not the utmost goal to become a leader. I mean, it's again what I said. It's a responsibility and it's a service, and I think you should really want it. You should not want to become a leader just because you might receive, it might be perceived as being successful. You should really want to work with people, and you should really want to invest time into people. That's the most, I think that is the important point. And second point is leadership opportunities will come, and you should not jump after it. I think there are many ways to prepare yourself. There are I think, especially in the early years, there are great opportunities to build expertise as a foundation, and then jump into it. And I think what we have to consider, I mean, a career is 30 years long, and it might not be the most important point to jump into leadership after 2 years. Another aspect in this context is, and this is a little bit coming back to the changes that it makes with you, is what you realize, and I think that I could imagine that this is the biggest change for many first-time leaders. Normally you are promoted into a leadership role because you are a high performer, an outperformer, on delivering, on content somehow. So in many cases you are yourself delivering a lot, but what you realize immediately in a leadership role is you can work yourself to full exhaustion. You will never compensate if your team is not supporting you, and if your whole team is not working against a joint target. Especially not when it's a team of like 25 people. So you might be possible if you're having a team of 1 or 2, but with bigger teams it's impossible. And that's, I think, the most important thing to be aware of. You are only as successful as your team can be successful. So and that is the key to get the rubber on the road. And you're also, maybe it's not fully right, but you're also as strong as your weakest part in the chain. And that is what you need to dedicate on. So it doesn't help you if you're the most intelligent one. You have to develop your whole team.
Very nice. When I hear you speak about this experience and your story, there's a sentence coming up, leadership of self. That's part of this journey before leading others is also leading yourself. How to deal with the pressure, how to learn to relax, how to know what you want. Can you relate to that?
It's a good question. I mean, of course, I think you have a lot of pressure. You have fears, and you have to deal with it. And by dealing with it, what helped me always is to put things into perspective. I think this is still the biggest help for me. Also, if there are personal threats and so on, it's always to put things into perspective, and I think not to take yourself too serious, especially when it comes to whatever, even when there were conflicts with colleagues, with peers, but especially with subordinates. The first reaction is often like, that's not okay. But then you should take a step back, take a breath, and really ask yourself, I mean, is it really such an issue? And that I think that helped me. That helped me a lot in all the different steps, and to deal with many of the challenges.
You made a huge shift in your career from a big factory manager leading 750 employees to a strategic role in the headquarters with no managerial responsibilities. What were the reasons for this shift?
I mean, first of all, the very obvious reason was that my assignment as a factory manager went kind of to an end. So I finished maybe half a year earlier than normally. What was also a matter of fact is that I was, in this role, I was more out of my comfort zone as I should have been, and as I have been in other roles. And I think it was first of all, it was a decision that it was not taken by me. So I was really this type of guy saying, even if I'm out of my comfort zone, I'm finishing things up, and then I can take another step. But in retrospective, I'm happy that this proposal was made to me to step out a bit earlier, and I think it was looking into the next role. At a first step, it was weird because, as you said, like from the age of 29, I was only in line management roles, always with big leadership responsibilities. But I think what you realize over time is that this headline or this topic of you're delivering a service is a big one, because I mean, big parts of your time you're investing into delivering the service to an organization, especially when you have a big leadership responsibility. And I think there are other parts. There are other parts in a career that needs to be built as well. And when I look at my current role, for instance, it's there are many things about indirect leadership. So it's maybe not always the only. It's not only always the first view to say how many people are you leading. It's more the question, how much influence are you giving to an organization, and that's actually the learning that I'm undergoing right now. But of course, when you're first confronted with a decision to say, okay, no, you're now stepping out of a leadership position with 700 people to a non-leadership position, this implies some sort of change with you that you have to undergo.
What did it do to you when you got that announcement?
Well, first of all, I was simply afraid what this would mean, and I was kind of afraid what kind of perspective I would see with this role. But I would say after the first thoughts about this, actually I did what I asked to myself to say. I mean, don't take yourself too serious, and don't focus on what people might think. Don't focus on what people might see in this role, but rather see what's in it for me. And I realized that there was a lot in it for me. I mean, first of all, to learn and really experience the political scene in a headquarters, in seeing how to influence an organization, but second also to take this also as a chance to rebalance me personally.
Was it actually even a sign of help? A good way out, in a way.
It could have been a sign of help, and this might have been one of the reasons why I took it quite easy, because when I was asked to take this new role, I already had a tentative diagnosis of a heavy disease, I would call it like this, and this had made me start to go into process of rethinking my priorities in life. And I have to say it was like the perfect moment to get this offer, because it was really the right time to also get this chance to rethink my private priorities as well.
So what I hear is sometimes we were a bit stubborn in our own pride.
Yeah.
You probably would have kept on going.
Yes.
If that person would say, what about stepping out now?
Yes.
Get a break.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, if I look at myself, I would say I can be quite stubborn, and I was really really tough with myself, saying I don't step out before I haven't tidied up some things. And here I would really say sometimes it helps to simply have this view, yeah, but you have to have the full perspective, and sometimes it's also better to say, I'm taking another road now.
It takes a whole lot of courage. How did people approach you? Did you get any comments, or were they not commenting, or? Because I can imagine this, this talented Leif, so early, and these responsibilities, and.
Yeah, there were. I mean, there were both. There were no comments, which you could interpret, but there were also comments where people were like, where people like interpreting that I was on a sort of exit role, that it was like a sort of like these typical roads where you are in a hierarchy, parked, and then sometimes you disappear. So, but maybe in the first, when I didn't understand myself how the role would look like, I might have. I think I had some. Well, actually, no. Actually, it was rather when I was first approached that I had this thought. But when I started the role, I did not have this thinking at all. And then I had to smile actually inside of me to say, okay, guys, I mean, the world is not that superficial as you think of. There are far more layers that apparently many people don't see. But of course, it makes something with you, and it requires courage, and it requires some kind of effort to withstand this. Yeah.
What does it do to you that you have a cameraman here, and you know that this video is going to be displayed and shown?
What does it do to me? It's a good question. I don't know what it does to me, but what I realized over time, and especially also dealing with the health threats, is that I think everybody is undergoing challenges sooner or later in a career. There are very few who have a very straight path ahead. And I think what you also realize over time is that you grow with challenges and not with simple success. And that is why I would say, yeah, we often don't openly talk about it, but I would say everybody of us has her or his challenges and experiences and got something out of it. So I think it's of course it's not easy to talk about it, but it's for me it's important to talk about it because it's part of the process.
And sometimes I think that's a little bit the learning that we are allowed to learn, yes. Showing that vulnerability, and that vulnerability might actually be a strength. That I have the courage to speak about not only the bright side of life, but also the sides where I had dark moments.
And I think I have frequent discussions with my daughter when she tells me I don't know this, I can't, and I tell her, yeah, that's why you have to try and you have to learn. And I think the example with learning how to walk is the best one, because you only learn with failing. There's nobody who stands up and walks without failing, and that's what it's all about. And so I think it's not a big deal. I think what you have to secure, or what you have to make sure that you have the chance to grow out of your experiences, and that you don't shrink. That's the key.
And I think it has a lot to do with leadership. A leader has the courage to show vulnerability, can allow for vulnerability in an organization, and I can allow for other employees to also talk about the failures, the mistakes, or the things, or the moments in life where things didn't go as smooth as expected. Only then you open up for a new and real conversation.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word leadership programs. What's the one thing that needs to be part of any leadership program?
That's a tough question. I think it's I think it's not about tools. So that is, I would say, the key to understand, and that's what I appreciate a lot about the different programs that I went through, is to learn it's not being the nerd to say I know all the tools. It's important, of course, to understand that there are tools that help you, and that there are tools that reduce complexity, that make you apply things quicker and easier. But eventually, it's about understanding yourself. How do you react? What are your strengths? What are especially your development areas, and how do you manage your development areas? I think that is the most important benefit that I saw and that I learned from the leadership programs. And that's a continuous effort. And I would say it never stops. The interesting thing is that when it comes to your development areas, you see them again and again. But the nice thing is also that you see that over time you start developing strategies to manage them. And that's, I think, that has to be part of every leadership program. And it's never completed. I would really say there are very, very few people who are that perfect that after leadership program number 2, they have the full control over their development areas. That's not the case. And I think you change as a person, and that's also why you have to adapt your strategies.
Thank you, Leif. You confirm a lot what we also believe in P Perspective, exactly that. It's not really that important, the tools and the handbooks. It's about that human development, who I am and what I'm heading. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you very much for your trust in us. And I'm very curious to see where you are in 5 years.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks
a lot.